Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's planning meeting for today, Thursday, or pardon me, Tuesday, September 26th. I'll call a meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. And we'll start off with our territorial land acknowledgement. Before our meeting gets underway, I would like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectively acknowledge the township of Allen-Wick-Haldimand is located on the Mississaugan-Ashaninbeg territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississaugan-Ashaninbeg. The township of Allen-Wick-Haldimand respectively acknowledge that the Mississaugan Nation are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and the integrity for generations to come. I'm going to read the procedural bylaw portion that identifies with what members of the public can partake in the council meeting. Regular council meetings are open to the public and they are encouraged to attend. To speak at a regular meeting, a request for a delegation form must be submitted to the clerk. These forms are available on our website. Public meetings are open to the public. They allow members of the public to address council without the need to pre-register their request. An example of a public meeting is a planning meeting, which we're having tonight, where land use planning applications are reviewed and council seeks input from the public. Closed meetings may occur during a council meeting to discuss confidential matters as identified in the Municipal Act, Section 239. Members of the public are not permitted in these meetings. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Seeing none from council, that'll be recorded. Approval of the agenda as circulated. Be it resolved, the municipal planning meeting agenda for Tuesday, September 26, 2023 be approved as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Deputy Mayor Stover, seconded by Councillor Booth. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. We're going to move on to delegations. And tonight we are going to honor our National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and the Orange Shirt Day. And tonight we have the pleasure of having our local chief from Alderville First Nation, Chief Tainer Simpson, here tonight to address council. So Tainer, you're welcome. Come on up and we'll set you up for your presentation. Thank you very much for coming on your busy time. And I know this is an extremely busy week with all of the festivities that you're organizing and partaking in. So, but we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. Great. So do I have the floor?
You have the floor.
Excellent. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Chief Tainer Simpson. I've only been on the job for a couple of months. But prior to that, I was on council for a couple of years. And pretty much since the mid 1990s, I've been involved with the federal government working on Indigenous legal issues, reconciliation issues. I guess starting in 1996, I first worked for Department of National Defense at National Defense Headquarters, where we were bringing in employment equity and gender integration, because up until that point, they were the only department that was, exempt from employment equity standards. So we brought that in. So at that point, that's when I realized that, you can make a difference. You can change something that doesn't quite seem right. So that's, I guess, when my spark for trying to make a difference on a national level first came in. Starting in 1999, I first was working on the Indian residential schools files when the apology that Jane Stewart had given really opened the doors to what we know now, the healing process, the settlement agreement. So up until then, most people didn't know about residential schools, and a lot of times, people didn't really learn about it till the Kamloops discovery happened. We had always known that they were there. It wasn't really a secret or a surprise to the people that knew that it was there. But to the rest of Canada, I had friends reaching out to like, do you know this happened? And I'd be like, yeah, we knew about this. And people were just shocked that, this was something that wasn't new news. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation, and it's basically about the history of residential schools, and it's the background information of how it could have come to be in this country. A lot of people don't quite understand how residential schools fit into Canada. Were they a one-off? Was it just something that happened? But really, it was part of a master plan of nation building that the government at the time, Sir John A. Macdonald's government at the time, was intent on getting rid of the Indigenous population, if not physically, then as a cultural entity, so that there were no longer Indian people in Canada, and therefore there were no, I guess what would be referred to as like land rights of Indigenous people. So if there's no Indigenous people, then there's no Indigenous land rights, and therefore Canada was free for the taking, because as we all know, these lands weren't Canadian lands originally, so that had to come to be eventually. So I will go to the presentation that I've put up. So do I have the ability to move the screen or? Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll just maybe give you like a. Oh, all right. Okay. Let's see. So I guess we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I already introduced myself, but I'm going to read through it anyway because I'm a creature of habit here and it's on paper. So my name is Tainer Simpson, and I am the Chief of Alderville First Nation. I hold my degree in anthropology with a specialty in Indigenous governance. I first started working on Indian residential schools research in the late 1990s for the federal government, around the same time that the last residential schools were closing. My research was conducted for the litigation, alternative dispute resolution process, and eventually the Indian residential school settlement agreement restitution processes, which include both the common experience payment and the independent assessment protocol, which was for the most severe claims of abuse. I am also conducting research for the Indian Day School settlement process. And most recently, I was the project lead for the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation's Missing Children and National Student Death Registry Initiative, where we identified the students who perished at the residential schools. This project only looked at the archival record, and we know this would not represent the total number of students who never came home. I can't really say the number, but there was thousands upon thousands of children that we identified, unique names, identifiers. I guess we can go to the next slide. So the beginnings of industrial and residential schools started when Christian missionaries arrived on Anishinaabe lands with the intent of saving our souls. Many of our people embraced the new Christian religion as they saw parallels between our Creator and their God. These missionaries served a double purpose. However, their intent was to pacify and assimilate the Anishinaabe peoples, all Indigenous peoples, so that the European colonists could occupy our lands. I guess, yeah, we can go here. So I want to make sure I got the right page numbers. Might be missing something. Okay, so let's see, I definitely have, oh my gosh, it's double-sided. All right. So the new nation of Canada was determined to solve the Indian problem through assimilation and legislation. Their solution was to kill the Indian in the child, and that was that's the quote right from their mandate, thereby solving their Indian problem. Also another quote. This was an effort to erase our culture and society and replace it with Eurocentric views and ways. The industrial school system was devised even before Canada became its own country. These schools were intended to teach Indigenous children the new ways of the settlers. Shortly after Confederation in 1867, the Macdonald government enacted the Indian Act and formalized the industrial residential schools system. In Canada's views, the current assimilation efforts were not strong enough or fast enough, as our people still held on to our culture, our beliefs, and our ways, and most importantly, our lands. The Indian school systems were designed as the final solution to remove the biggest barrier to the nation building process. So as you can see, this this is an industrial school. So those were started in the 1830s, and they went for about 90 years until they were eventually replaced by the residential school process. You don't hear about like industrial school claims because there wouldn't be any survivors from industrial schools as they were so far back in the past. So industrial schools were built in remote areas to ensure regular attendance and isolate the children from their families and cultures. Industrial schools received substantial funding from the government. The student base was comprised of older Indigenous children at the time, with the intent of teaching farming and other trades. The original industrial schools opened in Ontario before spreading to the other provinces. The first industrial school in Canada was built in my home community of Alderville First Nation, and it's now actually the site of our band office where we hold our chief and council meetings. So it's very interesting that we're sitting on such a infamous land area. So that's something that we definitely have to come back around to and do some healing ourselves there. So the school, our Alderville Industrial School, was founded in 1836 under the administration of Reverend William Case. So this school burned down and then was replaced in 1839, which was about a year after it burned down. So funding for these schools came from the churches and the Department of Indian Affairs. In 1923, industrial schools were largely merged into the residential school system, which was a different system with children aged at the time was 5 years old up until 16, but then the age was raised to 6. But you would still see 5-year-olds in these schools. Mohawk Industrial School actually persisted well into the 21st century. I guess we can go to the next slide. So by 1920, it was mandatory for all First Nations children to attend a residential school from the age of 6 to 16. The children were purposefully shipped far from their home community. Then again, this was to sever the connection to their family and their culture. So the residential school system went on for over a century until many generations of our people had been brought up through the residential school system. Once a child entered the school, they were stripped of everything they had known about themselves, including their name. Their hair was cut short. They were forbidden from speaking their language or practicing their culture. The children were functionally indentured servants and wards of the states because these weren't schools as we know them. We weren't being taught an education. We were basically working fields. We were cleaning the place. We were serving the reverend, the father, the nuns. So we were basically just cleaning and helping us. So an education isn't something that was actually part of the residential school process, despite its name. After this, you would get intergenerational trauma and poor health. So when you graduate from school, you didn't really have the necessary skills to be a functioning adult. So these were hallmarks of the Indian residential school system. Yet, despite the efforts to assimilate us, the students were still poorly equipped to enter and thrive into a foreign society. So in essence, we became ill-equipped for both our own culture and for theirs. This was the intent of the Indian residential school system. The narratives of the day had us vanishing in a few years, so it didn't really matter what they did to us. There was no real place for us in their world. Canada's plan had worked very well. Indigenous lands were now Canadian lands, and we were legislatively subjugated to Canada, not as citizens, but as wards of the state. In the late 1960s, there was a growing movement to remove the churches from administering the schools. Special investigator R.F. Davey produced a damning report of how the schools mistreated and abused the students. He noted that the schools failed in providing proper education and did not meet an acceptable duty of care. I guess that was an understatement. The government responded by severing the churches from the schools, And by the 1970s, many of the schools were operated by the individual bands themselves under prescribed government funding agreements and arrangements. But unfortunately, this only marginally improved the student experience in the residential schools. The system of abuses and the legacy of the schools remained intact. We can go to the next page. So here we are in Anishinaabe territory. This is who we are, also known as Ojibwe or Chippewa historically. We are the Mississauga Nation within the larger Anishinaabe Nation and the territory. So I'll give a little bit of background about the schools that were in our territory, specifically for the Anishinaabe. Anishinaabe Nation was home to 5 Indian residential schools, dozens of day schools, and several industrial schools over the past 2 centuries. Thousands of Anishinaabe children were forced into these federally mandated schools. Despite the best efforts to assimilate us, we are still here. We still know who we are and where we came from. And we are holding on to our Anishinaabe which is our language, and we're passing it along to our children. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the 5 schools that I'm mentioning here. So if we go to the next page. So this is a Shingwak school. And that was in Garden River, was the First Nation that was, I guess, closest to it. So this was in Sault Ste. Marie, and I believe it's been turned into a university right now or something. I want to say Algoma or something, but I could be wrong. It did become a university. So the building itself, I guess, still exists. And it was an Anglican run school from 1878 to 1970 when it closed as a residential school. We can go to the next page. So this is Mount Elgin. This is kind of where I grew up in close to London, Ontario. This was a Methodist United Church run school, and it was in Municipal, Ontario, and the closest First Nation to them is Chippewas of the Thames. And this school ran from 1867 to 1946. But prior to that, it was an industrial school that ran from 1851 to 1858. We can go to the next slide. This is Fort William / St. Joseph Residential School. So this was a Roman Catholic run school in Fort William, Ontario, and its closest First Nation is Mission First Nation. It ran from 1885 to 1970. We can next slide. So this is Spanish had 2 schools. There was a girls' school and a boys' school. This is the Spanish girls' school, and its religious affiliation was the Roman Catholic. It's in Spanish Ontario, and it ran from 1868 to 1962. That 1868 range is the when it operated as an industrial school. Next slide. So this was the Spanish boys' school. It ran from the same dates, 1868 to 1962. The difference about the boys' school is it was run by the Jesuits, as in the girls' school was run by the Roman Catholic Church. So they were separate orders, but it was also in Spanish Ontario. I guess we can go to the next page. So where are we now? It's been over 25 years since the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, called RCAP, released its findings. The RCAP revealed the horrors of the residential school system to the rest of the country. Even though in 1996, when it came out, it was all about the residential schools. But even then, much of the country just ignored it, and the federal government put the RCAP on the shelf and pretty much never came back to it. So it wasn't until a year later in 1997 that the last residential school closed. So when RCAP released its results, there were still residential schools running in Canada. So Gordon's residential school in Saskatchewan was the last one to close. And when I was first working for the residential schools records office in 1999, all the records from Gordon's residential school were shipped straight to Indian Affairs, where I was. So we collected these boxes and boxes of records, and we got to see what an untouched residential school record collection looked like, because what we had until then was just what the churches and what the government had deemed archivable. So we'd only be getting a snapshot, but when we saw the Gordon's files, we were able to see exactly really what was kept and what a full record collection could look like. But for them, that was probably the only school we're ever going to get that much records from. So shortly after this, the Minister of Indian Affairs, Jane Stewart, apologized for the atrocities that occurred in the schools. So this was a catalyst for many healing journeys. So soon the survivors were sharing their stories. They were no longer suffering in silence and alone. Litigation was launched against the Crown, and eventually the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement was reached between the federal government and the Assembly of First Nations. So survivors were minimally compensated. I'm going to say that because for the same abuse, non-Indigenous children were getting anywhere from $1 to $2 million, whereas Indian residential school survivors were getting about $30,000. So we're not quite sure why that alone just doesn't seem right to me, or it shouldn't seem right to anybody. But more importantly, Canada accepted its role and intent in this assimilationist and genocidal endeavor. So although it was the churches that operated these schools, it was the government of Canada who bore the brunt of these damages. So next slide. And now here we get to September 30th and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So this is a picture of Phyllis Webstead as a child, and also as she looks, well, I'm not going to say today because that's a couple years old. So we have Phyllis Webstead. So September 30th marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, also known as Orange Shirt Day. And I can see everyone here wearing their orange shirts. Thank you. The nationally recognized day is in honor of the experience of Phyllis Webstead, who was denied her belongings on the first day of residential school enrollment. Her new orange shirt that had just been given to her was confiscated on the first day and never returned, and she never saw that shirt again. Her experience was repeated 100,000 times over the last century of the residential schools in Canada. So the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation will ensure that the true history of the residential schools will never be forgotten. Next slide. I guess we go to the next, if there is one. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued its final report in 2015. The report investigated the impact that residential school system had on Indigenous people in Canada. The report identified the shortcomings, inherent paternalism, and colonial tendencies that were ingrained in the philosophy and administration of these schools. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued 94 calls to action to address the abuses and legacy of the Indian residential school system. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission documented the atrocities of these schools, and they will now forever be entrenched in the Canadian fabric. The TRC determined that the residential schools were, quote, a systematic government-sponsored attempt to destroy Aboriginal cultures and languages and to assimilate Aboriginal peoples so that they no longer existed as distinct peoples, end quote. So how we move forward, we'll decide what kind of country Canada will be now and in the future. There were several themes to the TRC calls to action, so I kind of put them together here in what the main I guess categories were. And here we have the implementation of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP. A lot of municipalities have they've instilled UNDRIP within their mandate. There's also the full implementation of Jordan's Principle, which means that Indigenous children should receive the same level of care as non-Indigenous children. It's unfortunate that we need to have a separate principle for that. Adequate program funding as compared to the rest of Canada. And then developing a true nation-to-nation relationship. Now, when you think about that, what's nation to nation? A nation is, you can't have a treaty relationship if it's not nation to nation, because you don't make treaties with who you consider your own citizens, your own people. A treaty by definition is an agreement between nations. So we need to get back to that. We need to get back to what the original intent of the treaties was, and not what the Indian Act decided to change the formula to. Then we also have church apologies, which they called for a papal apology, and at the time people were thinking there's no way that's going to happen, and as we know, the Pope did indeed apologize. So then we have the identification of missing children, which is the project that I had been working on for the past 2 years, and we identified the thousands and thousands of missing children. and the deceased children. So we actually identified many children that there was no word about. I can't say the exact number, but these were children that there was never made it home. There was no death certificate. They had been missing, and nothing was known about them. So we were able to get some closure for those families. We know that there's a lot more children that are missing out there, and that's where we get these unmarked burials. And the next step of what the NCTR is working on is going to be the unidentified burials. So that's a big project that we'll be working on next. And then you also have education and commemoration, which I guess is what we're doing here today and every September 30th. So I think that's I guess I'll close with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation was formed after the TRC concluded its mandate. So the NCTR has been tasked with ensuring that the legacy of the residential schools is forever memorialized. And we must build a new relationship with Canada that is built on the nation to nation model. And Canada must understand that we're still here as distinct Indigenous nations. We must honor the ultimate sacrifices that our most vulnerable children made. And this is why we honor the children on September 30th. Thank you for your time today. And so I guess I can answer any questions if anyone's got anything more. Want more details on anything or to ask, please feel free.
Okay. Well, Chief, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I should read our resolution, but maybe there'll be some questions before I do that too. So I'm interested in, it's very interesting report, and it's eye-opening and very unfortunate. Maybe that's not even the right word for it, but you know, we certainly my ancestors were part of this, and probably didn't know what to do and probably made some mistakes. If I could be perfectly honest with you. And I'm sorry for anything that we did to your people, our people, because we're all people of God, as far as I'm concerned. I do have one specific question though. I didn't realize there was any schools in where we consider now Alderville, but you're saying there was in the industrial schools were there, and did it eventually become a residential school as well too, or?
Well, so our industrial school that started in the 1930s, it lasted up until the 1880s. And then when it shut its doors, Alderville was actually home to an Indian day school. So the day schools were in areas where there wasn't enough population to have a formal residential school. So there was probably the lesser of two evils. So we had generations of Alderville aliens coming up through the day school system, which had its own settlement agreement. After the residential schools laws came into being, they realized that they couldn't gather every child and send them to a residential school. So that's where the day schools came from. And so Alderville, I guess, was fortunate to have a day school. And so that didn't close until 1968, I'm going to say. So my father went through that school system, and it was a one school, like one room schoolhouse. So the education that was given there, even though it was a good teacher, he wasn't able to teach all 8 grades through the course of the day. So by the time my father went to high school at the CDCI West in Cobourg, he realized that his education was far behind where other people were. But he did catch up. He didn't miss a single day of high school, and he went on to be pretty successful in computer programming.
So, very, very good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Must be proud of him.
Oh, I am, yes.
Yeah. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Booth?
Through you, your worship, just wanted to thank you, Chief Simpson. It was very informative. I didn't realize a lot of what we were talking about, so it's very eye-opening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Go ahead.
To your local, Chief Simpson, do you suspect burials in the Alderville area that are unknown at this time?
We actually are aware of their unmarked burials right next to the school grounds and the church grounds. We've had some GPR that went down not too deep, only about 3 or 4 feet, and several hits came back where we know that there are unmarked burials. We not quite sure what they're from, if they're from the industrial school, if they're just from the history of the church, maybe that's where they bury people. We know some of them are from a typhus outbreak that we had, so we buried them. So we actually know that if we were to say exhume these, we are potentially bringing a live typhus back up. So we were advised that maybe we should keep them there, but we are looking into deeper ground penetrating radar and maybe mapping out everything else. We would likely leave everything in place and just memorialize the grounds, make sure we have everything covered. It's close to the parking lot where our school buses park. So once we identify everything, we'll probably have to reclaim some of that parking lot and just have a proper burial site for them.
Thank you. What, just one more.
Go ahead. Deputy
Mayor Logal. Thank you again. I learn something every time I hear one of these presentations, and it's very sad to hear what had happened to the kids. I can't imagine, but thank you for taking the time to come tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, it's not something that you can really sugarcoat, and it is such a hard topic that there's no way to say it that's doesn't make you feel bad. And I wish it wasn't the case, but it's sadly those are
It
the
is
facts.
what it is.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Just make which.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you, and for listening. It's an honor to be here and to have ears that are willing to hear the truth and the stories. It really means a lot. So, Miigwech.
Thank you.
I'll read the resolution and then we'll, if there's anything else. Be it resolved, the Township of Alma-Calderwood Council received Chief Simpson's presentation for information, and we thank you, Chief, for your time and your considerable knowledge that you've been kind enough to share with us tonight. And I'm hoping that you would consider mentioning what you're going to do next Saturday. So in case any member of council or a member of the public would like to join you when you actually do your celebration.
Yes, fantastic. So this Saturday from 10 to 11, or no, sorry, 10 to 1. That was not 10 to 11 would be very long. So 10 to 1 at the Health Services Building in Alderville on the 45. We're having an event where there's going to be jingle dress dancers, drumming, storytelling, and we're going to try to make it an event that the kids can enjoy as well too. I mean, it's not what you would call a celebration, but looking back, residential schools denied childhood to our children, and now we can let children be children. So I think we're still defining what National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is. It's a terrible thing, but I think what moving forward, what we learned is that you know, we can't we can't try to do what's been done in the past, and we want our children to have the best life moving forward, and it really is about them. So there's not going to be any parking at the Health Services Building. We're having 2 staging grounds at the Glen Crow Memorial Ballpark. And also at the community center. So if you park in those 2 locations, there'll be shuttle buses that will bring you to the Health Services Building where you can attend the event. It's open to everyone in the community, larger community. Anyone who wants to attend is welcome to attend. And normally we walk up the 45, but we're not doing it this year because it conflicts with the Roseneath Fair. And so there's going to be tons of traffic coming up to the fair, but hopefully people will say, hey, screw the fair, let's go to the or insert day commemoration. But or you can do both. We're actually having a booth set up at the Roseneath Fair. Councillor Lisa McDonald and a representative from Nogdawin Benogiag Child and Family Services will be there. So it's just a little booth. We're handing out some information. So if you're at the fair, check that out as well too. And yeah, so we're having lots of dignitaries there. We've invited the OPP, not for traffic control, but just as our guests. Mayor Olena Hankiewicz is going to be there. I believe the Mayor of Coburg is going to be there as well too. And hopefully you're going to be there,
We'll be there.
Mayor Logal. So it's going to be a great event attended by anyone who wants to come. And yeah, I hope to see everyone there.
Miigwech. And I'll make one final comment, and Mary Catherine, we were the first one here, and were talking outside for a little bit. And we were talking about the school kids and how they work together to come up with that beautiful music. And that's what we all need to do, recognize that God created us all in his image, and we're all equal. And we can get a lot more out of life by enjoying everybody else's cultures and all the different other parts of life that are there.
Exactly. It's our differences that make us who we are, our cultures, our societies, and let's embrace them and all work together.
Okay, thank you so much. Should I read that resolution again? Okay, I need to move her in a seconder then. Mover and seconder, moved by Deputy Mayor Stover, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much for taking your personal time to come and entertain us tonight, and we really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Safe trip home. Okay, we're going to move on to it's actually not going to be a delegation tonight regarding the Rogers Rogers Communication Tower, but Tracy has a report, and my understanding is both Mr. Belchamber and Miss Lee are on for council wants to ask any questions regarding the tower. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Tracy, and you can give us your report.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just go through and do a
Yep.
summary of the report. In accordance with the Township of Almut Calderman Protocol for the Development of Telecommunication Towers, Rogers Communication Inc. has submitted a proposal to construct a new 90-meter or 295 foot guy wired tower on the property located at 11088 First Line Road, in the Township of Almut. A copy of the site selection justification report submitted by Rogers was included as an attachment to the report. So the proposed tower is located on the first line, which is just east of Benella, west of Benella, west of County Road 45. And it is illustrated in the report. The Rogers report states that the proposed site will achieve the necessary engineering coverage objectives of Rogers network and for the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, also known as EORN cell gap project, for which the tower is proposed to be a part of. The location will provide improved services for the area and will provide wireless signal coverage for residents and those traveling in the area. They had explored co-location options and determined that there was no other existing infrastructure opportunity in the area that was suitable for their needs. The closest tower is a bell tower that is about 5 kilometers northeast of the proposed site, which is too far from their target area and does not provide the height needed. Rogers undertook public consultation in accordance with our protocol. Property owners within 460 meters of the property were provided information regarding the proposal, and notice was placed in the local newspapers. Members were invited to attend an open house. However, no members of the public had requested to attend that virtual open house. One resident had called the applicant to express opposition to new towers in general, suggesting that operators refuse to co-locate. However, the applicant did provide examples of where co-location is happening. The individual did not follow up with any attendance to the public meeting or formal submissions. In their request, Rogers has asked for concurrence from the township to support the construction of the 90-meter guy wire tower at 1108 First Line Road. They have complied with our requirements for the Township of Alma-Calderman protocol for the development of telecommunication towers. And based on the completion of the process, we're recommending a municipal concurrence be granted. The recommendation is that council pass a resolution providing municipal concurrence for the construction of a new 90-meter guy wire communication tower at 11088 First Line Road, Part Lot 10, Concession 1, Geographic Township of Alma. Now the Township of Alma-Calderman, as described in the report prepared by Rogers Communication, Inc., submitted to the Township of Alma-Calderman be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Any questions for Tracy? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Through your mayor logo, Tracy, when I was reading this report, I'm not sure that I was aware that they were having an open house or a public meeting, I should say, like a Zoom type thing. So I don't know if I missed it or what. I just wasn't aware of it.
From my understanding, it was advertised in the paper on June the 8th. And notice did go out to the residents in the vicinity. I'm not aware if there's notice directly given to council on these types of applications, but I can look into that.
Might be helpful if we are aware that they are happening.
Yeah, I think historically, I can remember at least one other one where council was informed and council attended the public meeting because we didn't really know what was going on as well. So it actually did make sense to do that.
I was just, I guess, through your mayor logo, wondering if I missed it, but I don't, it doesn't appear I did.
No. Well, you missed it, I missed it. Too.
Yeah.
Any, Mary Catherine?
Ironically, my only note was concerns about communication while we're discussing a communication tower. But moving forward, we won't have the newspaper up there. And even now, in the past, I don't believe Northumberland News was being delivered up there. But I'm pleased to hear that it was sent to the people living in the neighborhood, and I would assume that's the people living in Alderville as well, right?
That's a good question. We can ask the Mr. Belchamber or Miss Lee, I would think, because you may not know that, or do you?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to look back at the circulation radius to see if Alderville was in that vicinity. If it is in that radius, I would expect that there would be notification to those owners.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Belchamber or Miss Lee, can you comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can't,
Go ahead, please.
sorry, can you hear me?
Is she live to talk?
Can you hear me okay?
Christine? She can speak. Christian, I'm sorry. Christian or Eric, are you on the Zoom?
Hi, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
There you are, Christian. Okay, we just can't hear you yet.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Hi, it's Eric Belchamber. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Please go ahead. Okay.
Because I could hear Christian and apparently he can hear me, but can you not hear us?
We can hear the gentleman on Zoom, so it must be for the chambers itself.
Okay, you can hear us okay?
Yes, we can. Those of us
Okay.
on Zoom.
Okay, so yeah, I was curious why Eric and I could hear each other, but the mayor couldn't, so it must be in the mayor's end. So just to address the question, I don't have the circulation list in front of me. I can try to pull that up while I speak. The circulation list was provided by the township to
Mr. Belchamber, can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me at all? Christian, we can all hear each other. It seems to be an issue in the council chambers.
Just hold on, we're working to get released
Okay.
somehow or another.
Can you hear us now? Can council chambers hear us at all or not?
Christian and Eric, would you mind closing down and then coming back on and see if we can fix that,
sure.
please? I see you waving yes, Christian, so please go ahead and do that. And Eric looks like he's done it as well, so we'll wait to see if you can get back and hooked up. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? So I left and rejoined. Is there an audio issue in council chambers?
Eric, are you there? Can you speak?
Yes, I'm.
Looks like you're not muted.
Yes, I'm trying to speak. Can you not hear us in council
Christian,
chamber?
you're back. I can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
It doesn't
Hello?
appear that you can hear us in council chambers.
It looks like you're both unmuted, but can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
So you can both hear us, but you aren't coming through.
It would be helpful if somebody could let them know that it seems to be just an issue at their end and the rest of us can hear each other.
Can you type that in the chat, Chris?
I can't seem to find the chat. I don't know if chat's disabled here. I don't see a chat option.
I don't see one either.
That's what I was trying to do a few minutes ago.
Christian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to try and text the mayor on his phone and let
Okay.
them know that we can hear through the Zoom link, but it's obviously a problem in the chambers.
It looks like we're not able to connect with you. The council may have some questions, which we would be happy to record. And then if we could send them to you and you could answer them, I think that's the best thing we can do.
Chris, back it up. We can't read it.
That's probably
Back it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Blurred out.
yeah, I have to turn off my background blur. You'll have to see my messy office.
Oh, the paper.
Council
Council can hear us. No, we
Hopefully they
can't
can
hear
read
you.
backwards.
Unfortunately,
No,
we can't hear anything that you're saying.
Christian was just one of the other attendees that could hear us.
Can you hear each
Oh.
other?
Yes,
So they can hear each other. Is that?
and we can hear you.
I would just suggest we move on, like you said,
Yeah.
Mayor, that if we have any questions, we can record them down and send to him and then
We're going to have to stop this portion of the meeting, but we will, any questions that we have, we will take a record of them and get back to you, and hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions. Thank you very much, Eric and Christian, for trying to help us out. And if something changes in the next few minutes, we'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Thank you so much. Anybody have any further questions? Okay.
maybe just one through you, your worship. A good point was brought up. So maybe in the future, council can be aware of this, because what I'm reading here is it sounds like anybody that's 460 meters from the property boundary received an information package. And then, as Councillor O'Neill said, then it was put in the paper, but in the future, the paper's not going to be a reliable thing. So because it sounds like nobody registered for the open house, so they didn't even have it. So there was no issues. But if we can be informed in the future, then if we have questions or if residents bring them up to us, we can address them at the open house.
Yeah. And we could put it on the website.
Yeah.
So that people would catch it and be part of the minutes.
Good idea,
there's a
yeah.
Public meeting coming up. Is there any sense in reading the resolution? Well,
To accept it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to read the resolution. Be it resolved that the report from Tracy Webster, Senior Planner, regarding the proposed communication tower at 11088 First Line Road be received, and further that the construction of a new 90-meter guide wire communication tower at 11088 First Line Road, Part Lot 10, Concession 1, geographically in the township of Allen-McCulderman, Township of Allenwick, now the Township of Allen-McCulderman, as described in the report prepared by Rogers Communications Incorporated and submitted to the Township of Allen-McCulderman, be approved. Moved by Councillor Booth, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Then we're going to go back to number 6. Thank you. And that is the municipal planning meeting minutes of Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. Resolution reads, be it resolved, the municipal planning meeting minutes of Tuesday, July 25th, 2023 be approved. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Booth, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
To you, Mayor Lobo, I just wondered if there was any more update on the Nichols Road. I know we give them some, or was us going to look into it, or did they have to come back with some recommendations?
I'm not 100% sure about what you're referring to.
I know it got deferred back when we had it. We just haven't had any update on it yet.
Okay, was that part of the minutes of the
Yeah.
25th? Okay. Tracy, you have a comment on that?
Through the chair, what app, is that a severance application?
It's in the July 25th,
July 25th.
8 minute.
Page one.
There are no updates at this time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? You'll look into that, Tracy, though, and give us a response.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mayor Lobo, I was just wondering, Tracy, if there's been any communication back and forth with the Danforth subdivision?
Through the chair, is that the new Danforth?
Yeah, the new
subdivision?
Danforth. Mhm.
There have been correspondence coming in from various agencies. They need to complete a thorough review of that file.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
As I recall, maybe that's what you're kind of addressing at the public meeting. There were some questions that were still to be answered. Have you heard anything from the because it was the planner that was actually took all those questions and was going to get answers for people
For the development,
through the development? Yeah. What's her name? Ruth?
maybe.
I think it's Ruth Altwell.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of correspondence that I have to sort through to determine if the questions have all been answered or if
Okay.
there's further information that is needed.
Okay.
That will be addressed in a report at a future date, once we have all the items needed to come back to report back on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All in favor? The motion's carried. Thank you. Next is item 7, motion to adjourn to a land division committee or committee of adjustment meeting. Be it resolved that the council of the township of Allen McCaldwin, being a land division committee or committee of adjustment, adjourn to a land division committee or committee of adjustment meeting for the purpose of hearing consent applications at 7:02 p.m. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councilor O'Neill, seconded by Councilor Ainsworth. All in favor? Motion's carried. And we have our consent applications. The first one is from Lisa and Joanne Brock, AH 142023 and AH 152023. Concession 9, part of lot 17, geographically in Haldeman, regarding creation of 2 vacant rural residential lots. Tracy, ready? Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'll summarize the body of the report and then read the recommendation. So the purpose of the applications AH 14/2023 and AH 15/2023 is to sever a 1.3 hectare and a 1.7 hectare parcel of land for the creation of 2 vacant rural residential lots from an approximately 4.57 hectare vacant rural property. There's a sketch that was submitted in figure 1. As I mentioned, the area of the severed lots are 1.3 hectares and 1.76 hectares respectively, and the retained lot would be 1.5 hectares. The subject property is located at 158 Leach Road, north of County Road 29 and Harper Road, and east of County Road 45. The property has been cleared and is under agricultural cultivation, with the exception of the southern portion of the property that contains an existing residence and small barn. The lot fabric within lot 17 and concession 9 is not typical of a traditional rural area. The lots range from 0.5 hectares to 4.8 hectares. Some of the lots contain residential uses, small farm uses, and some are vacant. There is an older barn on the subject property with the ability to house 5 medium horses. And there are two barns within 750 meters of the subject property with the ability to house livestock. There is a red barn with the ability to house 4 horses on an unaddressed parcel on County Road 29 directly across from Leach Road, and a white metal barn at 240 Leach Road with a capacity to house 6 horses. The subject property has been designated rural in the township of Allen-McCaldwin official plan. And as such, the PPS, while the PPS must be read in its entirety, the policies contained in section 1.14 and 1.1.5 of the PPS in particular pertain to the property. The majority of the property is located in the rural designation, which permits uses such as management or use of resources, resource-based recreational uses, residential development, including lot creation that is locally appropriate, agricultural uses, agricultural related uses, on-farm diversified and normal farm practices, and home occupations and home industries. The proposed severed and retained lots are locally appropriate rural residential lots. The PPS permits development that is compatible with the rural landscape and can be sustained by rural service levels. The proposed severed and retained lots are compatible with the rural surrounding land uses. When directing development on rural lands, it shall be appropriate to the infrastructure which is planned or available and avoid the need for unjustified or uneconomical expansions of infrastructure. Both proposed severed and retained lots have frontage on Leach Road, a year-round municipally maintained road. And both severed and retained lots are large enough to accommodate private services. Comments from the Northumberland County Septic Inspection Services indicate that they have no objections with the proposal. Compliance with the minimum distance separation requirements is mandated by both the PPS and the official plan. And the applicant has submitted a planning justification report prepared by Clark Consulting Services. That includes the minimum distance calculations for all the livestock facilities within 750 meters. And based on those calculations, they are in compliance with the PPS and the official plan. Mapping provided by Lower Trent Conservation showed a tributary of Burnley Creek to the west of the subject property. As a result, the northwest corner of the proposed lot, subject to application AH 14/2023, is within an area subject to the regulation. Future development of the parcel will be reviewed by Lower Trent Conservation for compliance with that regulation. And they have confirmed that there are no natural hazards on the subject lands. Therefore, it's consistent with section 3.1 of the PBS. Since there's adequate area on the lot subject to that application outside of the regulated area, Lower Trent Conservation has indicated that they have no objection to the proposed severance. The growth plan encourages development of new lots to locate in settlement areas. It does, however, permit limited development outside of settlement areas, particularly in the rural areas, which is permitted in accordance with both the PPS and the growth plan. The subject property is outside of the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. Therefore, those policies do not apply. Northumberland County designates the subject property as rural areas, and it permits uses such as agricultural, limited rural housing that's appropriate in rural areas, and does not preclude agricultural uses. In the township of Alma Caldeman's official plan, the property is designated rural. The rural designation is applied to lands that are of marginal value for agricultural and have potential for non-agricultural development. Permitted uses include agricultural related, on-farm diversified, small-scale commercial and industrial uses that are related to the rural economy, farm-related uses, residential uses, and non-farm related residential uses. The proposed severed lots would be considered non-farm residential uses and are permitted in the rural designation. New lots are required to comply with the minimum distance separation requirements as discussed in earlier. The MDS calculations were prepared and comply with the MDS required setbacks. The official plan contains policies for non-farm related severances in the rural designation, and these policies were reviewed, and the proposed severed and retained lots will be appropriately sized for rural residential lots. The official plan requires lots to have frontage on the year-round municipally maintained road, and both severed and retained lots have frontage on Leach Road, which is municipally maintained. Development adjacent to a water body is not permitted within 30 meters of a water course. The proposed lots are large enough to provide a building envelope outside of the setback of the water course located adjacent to the northwest corner of the subject property on the property to the west. The official plan policies require proposed lots to be appropriately sized to accommodate the proposed use and services. As mentioned earlier, Northumberland County Septic Inspector has reviewed the application and have no concerns. The proposed severance complies with the policies of the Alma-Calderman official plan and maintains the general intent of that plan. The subject property is zoned rural in zoning bylaw 19-2019, and it has an environmentally sensitive area in the vicinity of the water course. The rural zone permits a wide range of uses, including single detached dwellings, agricultural or farm uses, forestry uses, and bed and breakfast establishments, along with other uses. The minimum lot size in the rural zone is 5 hectares. The proposed 1.3 hectare and 1.7 hectare severed lots in the 1.5 hectare retained lot are smaller than the minimum lot size for the rural zone and will require a rezoning to a rural residential zone. The environmental sensitive area is limited to the small area at the northwest corner of the subject property in relation to the water course on the lands to the west. The permitted uses are the same as the underlying zone classification of the rural zone. Section 4.31 or 4.31 of zoning bylaw requires a 30-meter setback from the normal high water mark of the water course. There is adequate land outside of the ESA for a building envelope on the proposed lot, subject to application AH-14/2023. Subject to the proposed severed and retained lots being rezoned to the rural residential zone, both severed and retained lots will comply with the requirements of the zoning bylaw, provided the environmental sensitive area is retained. The Public Works Department has confirmed that the entrance for the proposed severed and retained lot are satisfactory. As discussed earlier, Trent Conservation reviewed the application and has no objection to the proposal. Northumberland County also had no objections. No comments were received from Bell Canada or Alderville First Nation. Notice of the application was circulated to all registered owners within 60 meters or 200 feet of the subject property, and a sign was posted on the property. No written submissions have been received to date. The proposed severed lots are located in a rural part of the municipality on Leach Road, a year-round municipally maintained road. There's no natural heritage or natural hazard features on the proposed severed lot. Both severed and retained lots are appropriately sized residential and rural parcels that are compatible with the surrounding land uses. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, generally complies with the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and maintains the intent of the Alma-Calderman official plan. So we are recommending approval of the application, subject to the following conditions: that a registered survey for the severed parcels be submitted to the township, that a closed polygon vector file be submitted in a DWG format, that a draft transfer for the severed parcels be submitted to the township, that the tax account for the subject property be paid up to date, that development charges for the severed lots be paid to the township, and that cash in lieu of parkland be paid to the township, and a zoning bylaw be in effect for the severed and the retained parcels. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Good report. Does any member of council have any questions for Tracy? That's good. Members of the public, anybody representing the RACs here this evening? Come on up to the mic in case we got people listening, please. Thank you, Bill.
My name's Bob.
Bob, I'm sorry.
I thought I'd make that clear. Yes, I'm representing the applicant here, and we've had an opportunity to review the report that's been prepared, and we have, I don't have any comments, and my clients have indicated that they don't have any comments as well. So
Thank you.
we're satisfied, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, any questions or comments from council? I don't have any. Thank you.
No.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Okay, well, Tracy read the recommendations and the, do I have to read all of that?
Would there be anybody?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Was any members of the public that are joining us via Zoom be interested in making a comment? Seeing none? We'll assume that that's been answered. So do I have to read the whole recommendation? Okay. All the way through? Yep, I can do that. The recommendation is that the application AH 14 and AH 15 by Lisa and Johann Brack to sever two parcels of land for the creation of two vacant rural residential lots at 158 Leach Road in part of lot 17, concession 9, geographically in the township of Haldeman is hereby approved, subject to the following conditions. One, that a registered survey for the severed parcels be submitted to the township. Two, further to the printed plan of survey, a closed polygon vector file of the part boundaries shown on the reference plan is to be provided in spatially referenced Autodesk DWG Windows readable format to the satisfaction of the township. It is recommended that the applicant's Ontario Land Surveyor consult with the County of Northumberland GIS sector to confirm acceptable standards and formatting. Three, that a draft transfer for the several severed parcels be submitted to the township. Four, that the tax account for the subject property be paid up to date. Number five, that the $11,813.38 development charges for the severed lot be paid to the township of Alma-Calderman. Six, that the $1,500 cash in lieu of parkland fee to be paid to the township of Alma-Calderman. And seven, that the zoning bylaw amendment be in effect for the severed and retained parcels pursuant to the Planning Act. I get a mover and a seconder. Moved by Deputy Mayor Stover, seconded by Councillor Booth. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
And the next application is from Core Car Farms Limited, St. Anne Spa, part lot 22, concession 2, part 1, 39R 20181, part lot 23, concession 2, part 1, 2, and 3, 39R 1853, and part lot 23 and 24, concession 2, part 1, 39R 3764. Part lots 23 and 24, concession 2, part 5 and 6, 39R 3764, regarding the request for cancellation certificate. Tracy?
Okay, thank you. The applicant owns multiple parcels that comprise the St. Anne's Inn and Spa facility. An application for site plan approval, SP 02 2022 for the construction of 16 new guest rooms and a future Nordic spa is nearing completion. The applicant wishes to consolidate parcels as part of the site plan process for the redevelopment of the St. Anne Spa property. Core Care Farms Limited owns the property in which St. Anne's Spa facility is contained and some additional landmark for future development and expansion. Consolidation of the parcels will avoid further consent applications for boundary realignments and easements in order to accommodate private servicing for the facilities. To consolidate parcels, historic consents are proposed to be canceled. A copy of the request for the cancellation certificate is attached to the report, and copies of the registration documents for the historic consents are also attached. The Planning Act requires no planning analysis for a request for cancellation certificate. During the review of the related site plan application, a thorough planning review was undertaken and the application was deemed to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. The application also maintains the intent of the Northumberland County and Township of Almut official plans. So we are recommending the certificates of cancellations be issued by the committee in relation to a number of consent certificates.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Stover, go ahead.
To your Mayor Lobo, I don't quite understand this whole cancellation thing. I don't think I've ever seen this before. And what is the purpose of it?
So through the chair, it basically allows the properties to merge back together. They had been severed at one point in time. And the only implication would be on the property owner who currently has multiple parcels. They would come together and merge together as one. So it makes it more efficient for them when they're providing services across those lands. It won't have to cross separate parcels. Is that?
Go ahead.
If I may, through your Mayor Logo, would this be when I really couldn't look at the documents, they were a bit blurred. And if I could kind of surmise in myself, these were probably homes that were there and they had purchased them. This organization had purchased them and they just want to have it all as one parcel. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, at one point they would have been severed.
Yeah,
So
and they just acquire the houses.
yeah. So now they're coming back together. I don't believe all the parcels have homes on them or dwellings on them. Some of them are vacant. So that may have been the case in some of the parcels.
Through your Mayor Logo, I did recognize one name that I could make out on the document. So that's what I thought. They were probably homes they acquired as they went along and they just want to make it one unit, one property.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they are all under the ownership of Corsair Farms Limited now.
And if I can, are they all attached? Like they're not parcel here and the parcel there and the parcel here and parcel there. Correct?
Yeah, they would, through the chair, there'll be two larger parcels created. So there'll be melding of, if you look at page 7 of the report, there's
Okay.
a diagram that shows the areas outlined in blue.
Okay.
Those would form two of the parcels. Rather than like 6 and 12 would come together to become one parcel, and then 1 through 4 would come together to form another.
Here, Catherine?
Just following up on that, it appears there were 12 parcels to start with, is that? And we're going to be down to 10 parcels? Is that the idea?
Um,
And my apologies for not asking before the meeting. Sorry.
it's, sorry, through the chair, it is quite a puzzle, to solve. So I believe it would be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 remaining rather than 12. I can clarify that.
Yeah, I was being ever hopeful that your words
Yeah.
would make this make sense to me because I was looking at it, but anyway, yeah, it does, yeah. What's happening here, I read and it makes sense, but the implications for the whole property is, I guess, where I'm still confused.
So the implications would be that the owner would own less parcels, so I don't see that as having an implication for the broader public. It just simplifies the installation of the services.
Thank you, Tracy. Any further questions? I'll read the recommendation. The certificate of cancellation be issued by the committee in relation to the following consent certificates. Instrument number 130385 issued on January 7th, 1986 that pertain to part lot 22 concession 2, part 1 39R2081, pin number 511290241. Instrument number 125933 issued on January 24th, 1985 that pertain to part lots 23 concession 2, part 1, 2, and 3, 39R1853, pin number 511290241. And instrument number 211622 issued on October 26, 1992 that pertain to part lots 23 and 24 concession 2, part 1, 39R1853, pin number 51129-0241. And instrument number ND 89317 that pertain to part lots 23 and 24, concession 2, part 5 and 6, 39R3764, pin number 511290239. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Booth. Seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Next, we're going back to reconvene to the municipal planning meeting. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Be it resolved of the council of the township of Allen McAlderman, being the land division committee. Committee of Adjustment reconvene to the municipal planning meeting at 7:29 p.m. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Booth, seconded by Deputy Mayor Scover. All in favor? Motion's carried. Business arising from the previous minutes. Any comments or from previous minutes? Go ahead, Mike.
Through Mayor Lovell, just on the July 25th. Sorry, the July 18th minutes.
Okay.
There was a piece in there for IT. For the township's computer stuff, and we haven't heard anything back on that lately. I just wondered if we're where we are with that.
Well, it's really got nothing to do with the planning meeting, but we'll find
Well,
out.
it's just the minutes that we have in there now.
It's in the minutes of the which
Yeah.
meeting?
Well, it's in the minutes of the July 25th, or sorry, the July 18th minutes in here.
Of the July 25th.
Number 15 of the
I don't know. I don't think there's any update to that.
There was a report from Nicole.
Go ahead. Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
That meeting on the 18th wasn't completed and it came back to July 25th to finish.
Okay, okay, so it was on the July
Yes.
25th. Okay. Anyways, I don't know if there's an update on that. I know there've been some challenges. In the fact that it's been changes in the county as well as changes. And it just, or pardon me, staff was away, so I'm not sure if they've got an update for it yet, but I'm sure we can get an update for that for the next meeting on next week on the 3rd, I believe it is. Okay. So we'll get you an update for that on the October 3rd meeting, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing, okay, go ahead, Mike.
To you, Mayor Logan, just when it comes to planning. So, and this is just my comment on the, so we have a resident on Merrill Road, 50 Merrill Road. And this piece of property that was severed off today on Leach Road is pretty close identical to what they got, other than it's classified rural instead of agricultural. And they're using it for agricultural, which is fine, and I'm okay with the severance and everything. But I just ask that this council with that we can push to try to figure out a way to help the resident on 50 Merrill Road with, because it's scrubland classified.
Sorry, Mayor Lowe,
Yes,
I'm afraid this isn't an item that is part of our agenda discussion tonight.
okay.
Well, it's got to do with planning. Right, and we're.
So,
asking that
so
we-
are you asking that that be brought up at a future planning meeting?
Well, I'm just asking that us as council, and maybe you might have the biggest push through the county to try to get the county to change their official plan or help us get this
Sorry, Mayor.
resident their help.
For you, Mayor Logal, this is an item that isn't on the agenda, so it can't be discussed at tonight's meeting.
Okay. Is that okay, Mike?
It's okay, but I'm just saying it's a, you know, it's a planning meeting and we have some issues. If we're trying to help our residents. we
I
can't forget these
suggest-
res-
I suggest that that be handled through staff rather than at the meeting then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Through your
Councillor.
worship, but I'm sure Councillor Ainsworth can bring it up under his planning issues when he gets a chance to speak.
As long as it's not debatable, because if we can't.
No, if he's just making a comment or whatever, just bring it up under your. You get to speak.
Thanks, Councilor Booth.
Good point. Any other business arising? Okay, I guess I'm up first. I've got a couple of things that will take me a second to grab it. But first I'll read a proclamation. And this is for Ontario Agricultural Week. The event is the Ontario Agricultural Week. The date is October 2nd to 8th, 2023. Whereas the week of October 2nd to 8th, 2023 is recognized as Ontario Agricultural Week, and whereas Ontario Agricultural Week is a time to celebrate food and farming across the province and all farm families and producers who work tirelessly to provide an abundance of nutritious local food in Ontario. And whereas Ontario farmers proudly grow and produce more than 200 different food commodities for local and international markets. And whereas agriculture is one of the largest contributors to the economy of the Township of Allen-McAlderman. Now therefore be resolved that I, John Logal, on behalf of the Council of the Township of Allen-McAlderman, do hereby proclaim the week of October 2nd to 8th, 2023 as Ontario's Agricultural Week, and encourage citizens to support Ontario farmers by buying local grown products. Dated this 26th day of September 2023. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Deputy Mayor Stover, seconded by Councillor Booth. Any comments? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. And I do have a couple of Other comments? First of all, everybody knows it, but I'll mention it anyways. The Rose Neath Fall Fair is coming up Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And we encourage everybody to be there. It's held at the Agricultural Society grounds as well as the Alamo Civic Center. And Alderville First Nation is hosting a Truth and Reconciliation Day Saturday from 10 till, I think he said 1. Also, the municipality of Port Hope, in honor of the Truth and Reconciliation Day, is hosting Inspiring the Change at the Capitol Theater in Port Hope, Saturday, September 30th, from 4 to 6 p.m. And all are welcome. And also the United Way Northumberland campaign kickoff and community barbecue is being held this Thursday prior from 11:30 till 1 p.m. and hot dogs are being served. And it'll cost you whatever you can afford.
Very good.
So it's and all are welcome. So that's at the Swain Street. In Colbert.
Mhm.
And if you like hot dogs, it's a great deal. Get my. And next we have speaking is Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Stover, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Logal. You have taken a few of my points that I was going to say. Other than that, I just remind everybody of the 28th, where we'll be recognizing the home children, and have my sunflowers all in line, and leave your porch lights on. And that's all I have. Thanks.
And that's coming up on Thursday.
Yep, 28th.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mike.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, so if I just want to finish it, I would like this council, like maybe I could say you, that would have maybe some more push with the county. Because from what I'm understanding, if we could get the county on board, we could get this service passed with the people at 50 Merrill Road, wherever. Instead of just like sitting, waiting for it to happen, can we push it to happen?
I would suggest that if that's what you want, you make a resolution to council. That we send a letter to the county asking them to consider that.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Or notice of motion, yeah. So if you do that for next week, when does he have to have that done? By today or tomorrow? Okay. You get it in quickly, then Nancy can do some stuff for you.
Yep.
Okay.
Before I leave. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mike?
No, it's fine.
Councillor Booth.
Nothing planning related at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Just a couple of things like Deputy Mayor Stover, you touched on a lot of good stuff. The United Way, the library does have some information sessions happening at each of the 3 branches, and it looks from the posters that they're seeking some input from community members who attend. The food hampers are in place at all 3 library branches, which is the following up to food security proclamation. And that's a joint project between the St. Vincent de Paul and the library. And today they also had guest speaker Rick Beaver at the Roseneath branch, and he did a fabulous presentation. He's got a great speaking voice.
And probably very interesting too. I've heard him a couple of times before, and he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, and he has a whole book in case you want to read the whole.
Okay. Approval of the confirming bylaw number 104-2023, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the municipal planning meeting of Tuesday, September 26, 2023. Be resolved that bylaw number 104-2023, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the municipal planning meeting of Tuesday, September 26, 2023, be read and deemed to be approved 26th day of September 2023. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Deputy Mayor Stover, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. All in favor? Motion's carried. And adjournment be resolved, the municipal planning meeting be adjourned at 7:41 PM. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Good evening.